Today I'm here with Valerie Pelletier, and we've been looking forward to this interview for a while now. Valerie is a French-Canadian woman who was fired for her Facebook posts when they were deemed transphobic, and she was fired from a women's organization. So we're going to talk about that story today and get a little bit more background on you, Valerie, so that people can understand the history and the context of this. And it's another case of a woman getting fired for her speech. So let's get into it. Valerie, well, first of all, thank you. And how are you? How have you been?
I'm good. Things are looking up in the sense that I will not let go. I'm seeing injustice, and it's in my nature to just not let it pass. And I've been witnessing everything that's going on with the gender ideology in the last few years. It's actually taken me astray from my main feminist agenda, which should be the abolition of prostitution. But because males kept entering our spaces, then I had to get interested in that topic. And then with what happened to me, it's already been a year ago. I was fired in February 2020. And so I took the first year to really see what I could do about this. So my first step was I actually checked with labor law, and I found out that if you've been employed under 2 years, again, these are Quebec and Canada labor laws, you cannot seek their help. Otherwise, had I been employed for 2 years and up, I could have gotten free defense and it would have gone through labor court. So then my second option was to check with the Human Rights Commission, which I had, reservations, because we have to remember that they're the same organization that defended Jessica Yaniv in Vancouver. So my concern was that they would be really into the gender Kool-Aid. But they actually received my complaint. So first you file a complaint, and then they pass it in front of a board, and it gets officially received, and you're assigned an agent. So I went through all those steps. But then it had been a year, and my file had been passed through 3 different agents, and the last and third one was not even responding to me anymore. So by that time I thought, well, it's been a year, what am I going to do? So I decided to go to small claims court, which here in Quebec is anything that you can claim up to a maximum of $15,000 damages with small claim courts, and you need to defend yourself. So I can get legal advices on the side to get ready, do my official paperwork that I'm submitting and so on, but I still have to represent myself. So that's what I did. And now that's where we're at.
Okay, so that's where we're at right now, a year
When I got in touch
out.
with you, initially, it's been already several weeks we've been in touch. When I got in touch with you, I had sent them the official letter of formal notice. And so they knew that I was intending to pursue this. So it's been a bunch of back and forth with my lawyers, with friends who advised me on labor laws and stuff. And so I'm going to go back to explaining what happened. So my position...
let's start with what your position was. What did you do for them? And what was this organization?
So I'm going to stay as vague as possible, because obviously there's ongoing litigations, and usually we're advised to wait until it's done. But I really want to join the international conversation, because there isn't a week where I don't see a woman getting the platform for being gender critical. So I've given them several chances. They actually engaged with us to set a date for a negotiation outside of court. And they showed up to that meeting to say firmly that they refused to negotiate. So this is where I'm at. Once they started to do this and to kind of attack my character in the sense of discrediting what I'm saying, what I'm accusing them of, that's just beyond me. So I think I've been kind and polite and respectful, and I'll continue to be. But by now, I feel like I need to free my own speech. So I will not name them or the terms of the pursuit. And I'll try to stay as vague as possible. We're just going to see it's a large Montreal woman agency that has several services, including shelter. So my job was actually not even... By profession, I am a counselor, but that year I decided to take a year off because I have a PTSD diagnosis, and I had an armed robbery happen to me a few years ago that really re-triggered my PTSD. And my PTSD comes from prostitution, because I'm a survivor of sexual exploitation. I've been out of the sex industry for 20 years, and ever since I've been trying to... It's a political decision for me to only work in nonprofit, which means that you have to accept lower pay scale. And basically, they actually count on that. They count on the fact that we want to give back, and we want these kinds of occupations so much that we're ready to settle for less, which is upsetting, but that's the reality. So a lot of survivors, they they really want their days to be coherent with their values. So they're not going to go sell their workforce in some private firm and feel alienated. So for me, I'd rather have lower pay, but have my days look like what I want my days to look like. So my job was actually very inconsequential. I was not in a counselor position with these women because I applied in that agency to kind of give myself a yearly break of not having any mental labor. So I took a job in a warehouse that they own, into which I received material donations. So that means sorting through clothes and furniture and cleaning it, making it presentable. And basically, when women have been homeless and they need everything to set up an apartment again. So this was what I was working towards. So even though I was getting only $12.90 an hour, my days were great. And physically, I'd rather have a job that's very physical. So that was loading, unloading trucks. In winter, it involved shoveling wherever the truck. Sorry, I'm French. Sometimes I search for words. And so basically, the days are like you work with the radios. You have volunteers that come in. It's very dynamic. It's very physical. You're super busy, so your shift goes by fast. And that's why I chose that job, because I wanted to be with people, not have any mental labor. And on the side, I have been working in the last few years to develop my own services, where I want to create a social enterprise for women that leave prostitution, that are ready to get back to I guess a work-like occupation, but I want to offer a non-hierarchical, really feminist environment to work into, where there's no boss. We all work towards a goal. We all take the decisions together. So that's what I'm trying to do, which is why I didn't want any mental labor. And I chose a job that's just physical and busy. And the other advantage for me is that from the donations that we would receive, if something is damaged or broken, then I could purchase it for like next to nothing, just because it couldn't be reused or resold or whatever, because it's not in good enough condition. But for me, it was good enough. So I would pick up a lot of stuff from there for like really cheap. So I got to, say someone gives an entire case of tools, and I got all my tools. I got sewing machine, like everything I needed, I was able to get from that job as an advantage. So this is the state of mind I'm in. I go to work every day. I'm smiling. I like my job. I like to talk with my colleagues. We have fun. We chat with the volunteers. These are busy, great days. And the only contact I have with the women receiving services at the resource is when I go to the cafeteria. The rest of the day, I'm in a basement or I'm in the backyard receiving donation. Like, my position is inconsequential. And this is important because it doesn't make sense with why I'm such a dangerous person that needs to be fired. So I'm at work. Midday, I get called in by the HR office. So I go to his office. The whole thing took about 25 minutes, and 25 minutes after, I was out. But not only I was out and I didn't have a job, but I was out like I'm a pariah. Like, you can't go back to cut your own lockers to empty your stuff. You have a last bill to pay. We're going to do an Interact transfer. You can't go and pay it physically yourself. Like, they did not want any of my colleagues to see me, and or to even know what exactly happened or why I was suddenly no longer there.
And what did happen? What was that conversation like in that room?
So I go in, and the HR person is male. I'm just saying, community agencies are allowed to take the direction that they want, but more and more you see women in agencies that have a lot of males in position of decision. Again, I have reservations about that. So he calls me into his office and he tells me, we've received 2 emails with screen captures of your activism online, and it's very transphobic. The word transphobic was used, and this is unacceptable. This is incompatible with our values. And then I go, whoa, time out. Let me explain to you what it is that I'm defending. And I'm not so much against trans people as I am for women's rights and the fact that we need sexo-specific services and places for ourselves. And I'm seeing that we are losing that. So I told him, if this agency has voted to include trans people, this is a decision you're actually entitled to make. And if I wanted to change it, I would go through the normal legitimate route. I would write in a paper with a lot of information on the consequences. I would submit it to the board of directors. Like, I know how to get things done. I'm not some crazy activist going around like, I didn't do anything behind the scene, and I didn't do militantism at work. What I'm being accused of is basically the way I think, and it's about what I do outside of work on my own time. So that's where the free speech angle is just unfathomable.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I'm not being told that I don't do my job correctly. There's no reproach as to my behavior at work. So I started explaining to him the reason why I defend this is I feel that women deserve sexual-specific services. And now I feel like it's being eroded. And I go on to explaining, you know, woman is not a feeling or a costume. And this
And
was
what
a
were the
young Black.
Facebook posts that the complainers had sent in? What did they say?
I haven't seen them, but I just want to
Okay.
make it like during my expose, because it's a young Black man. So he's like fresh out of like some business school. Again, I'm so exhausted with people getting out of business school, going to manage community services, because it's like such a different set of values and the premises aren't right. But because he's Black, I actually tried. I said, you know, what if someone came up to you and said, I feel Black? You would look at them and be like, no. And he laughed at me. And he replied to me, trans women are women. It's not the same. And so I was like, okay, I am literally swimming into something really ideological here. And I told him that. I said, you're defending positions that you're allowed to defend, but that are ideological. So, okay, so you decide to take that direction as an agency, fine, you can, but for me to think the way I think and to be leading the fights I lead outside in my own life, not only doesn't impact whatsoever my ability to do my job, but I told him, I agree with you. I am absolutely for not talking about activism at work at all. Again, those are all steps I'm taking to say, let's find a compromise. So you're not cool with how I think, but that's none of your business, because that's my free speech. And everyone who knows me, I'm not aggressive in my militantism at all. I care very much about the form. And the form needs to be in a way to open people's heart, and you can't open it if you're like aggressive and nasty. And I don't use the tools of the oppressor. I'm not going to lower myself to this level of male violence.
Mm-hmm. So what
So
kind of stuff did you talk about on Facebook, just so people know? I mean, you
yeah,
know, a lot of the people who watch are on Twitter, and we get in a lot of discussions. As you know, I was fired for my tweets, and
yeah.
people probably imagined, I don't know what I was saying, but it was really pretty mild stuff for the most part. But so I'm curious, what kind of stuff did you talk about on Facebook?
It's a mild in form, the same as you. It would just be explaining, say, if we talk about bathroom, by the way, we've had to fight for bathrooms because women did not exist in the public sphere. And my angle is, if we erase the actual definition of male and female, then as a radical feminist, we cannot name our oppression or the dynamic behind this historical oppression. My biological sex was not locked up in a house making babies and cleaning men's clothes because I feel like a woman or I dress or I look like one. It's because I am a woman. It's because of my reproductive system that I've been oppressed historically as a sex class. So I also tend to bring everything to the level of sex class in my analysis instead of just staying in unicorn individual cases, you know? So I was trying to explain all of this to him, and there was not only no opening to hearing that, but like, how can you qualify what I'm saying as transphobic? I'm telling you, trans people deserve rights. I shouldn't even have to say that. Like, but a special and oppressed class cannot win rights at the expense of another oppressed class. And my class is 50% of the population, and we still have not resolved whatsoever the fundamental conditions of our oppression, which are being, even though we do have some degree of rights, we still replicate just at the level of these millionaire Hollywood actors. There's still a difference in pay scale. Like, hello, like, we're starting from so far, and you're here trying to explain the reasons why my sex class is oppressed, and how we need males to let go of their privileges. The way I explain feminism, I always tell people, it's not so much that males are here and females need to reach them. Au contraire, males need to get off their freaking privileges. That's what equality would be, is to not use. So when a male sees that there's an inequality, again, what is it going to take for them to let go of their privileges? That's another fight. So here I am. I love my job. I go to work every day smiling. I'm accepting a low pay, and I know I could do anything else, but this was a choice for me to have this job for now. I needed a break. I need to be able to support myself, not have any mental charge, meet people, be in a woman's service. That's what I wanted.
Mm-hmm. And you
And
know that their policy is that they allow trans women into the shelters, right? So what
right.
did you think about that, and what did you observe in regards to that policy?
I never publicly denounced my employer. I never said this employer lets in trans. I never did that. I was always speaking generally, like, because I knew of the Vancouver Rape Relief and so many others. I'm saying that so many community agencies are feeling the pressure that they cannot refuse trans identified people. So can we talk about it? That's just
And when you say that specifically, you mean trans-identified males, right? Because
yeah,
I'm
of course.
assuming if they're females identifying as trans, that
Of
would be a
course.
different story.
Absolutely. Yes. So again, my angle is always that it matters, sex class matters. And yeah, so it was flabbergasting, but more than just what is happening to me, it's because it falls within a broader picture of I am exactly the kind of survivor that your agency would have been helping 10, 20 years ago. So for me, emotionally, to be fired so unjustly, basically because this HR person is taking the defense of like non-existent men in skirts. Like, I'm sorry, it's I don't. Okay, all right.
It's hard to talk about. It is, because the
It gets
language is so
upsetting because
obscure.
I'm a survivor. I give conferences. I'm really involved. I'm at a place of giving back. And this happens to me. And what he's holding on to defend by firing me is hypothetical self-identifying males at the expense of an actual female victim who has gotten out, who's done all the work, who's been in therapy for years, who's now in a place of really trying to, have an impact. So that was like, I can't take it because of that. Like, are you serious? You're firing a survivor for this? Like, are you serious? Like, it felt so like, what? So that was the additional extra pain from it. It's just not just the injustice of the firing, it's that it is being done to a survivor. That's just
And can you tell us, can we go a little bit into your history about, did you stay in a shelter like this at some point in the
I've
past?
had short bouts of homelessness, but unfortunately you make too much money when you're in the sex industry, in my time at least. And so homelessness didn't become a problem long term, because my long-term problem was being stuck in the sex industry much more than anything else at the time. So I will talk about this, but I just want to go back to the situation there. So what happened is that some people don't know that in Quebec, a few years ago, there was a takeover that was done. We had a large body representing, basically it was a large umbrella that had all the different female agencies were under this umbrella called Fédération des Femmes du Québec. So the Women's Federation of Quebec. And a few years ago, a trans-identified male took on the leadership. So we had a trans person, a male-bodied person, at the head of the Women's Federation. This led to a major split into which several community agencies left and created another body on the side called Pour le droit des femmes du Québec, so PDF Québec. And basically all the radical feminists, the universalist feminists, they all went that way because there's two problems. And bad ideas usually come with bad ideas, because the same people who will defend gender ideology are always pro-sex work. And those were a set of bad ideas that were so oppressive to women and replicating so much the same oppressive structure that I was like, what? But that person, the name is Gabrielle Bouchard, who took on the lead of the Women's Federation. Again, the arrogance, I have no idea. This is male entitlement at its summum. So this person has a crew. They got in by basically, I'm going to speak he, because for me, this is a male. This male got on, took on the presidency of the national women's organization, got all of his friends to come in, all the queer. So basically all the lesbians were pushed out, all the pro-queer people got in, and that's how they did it. But they also went around in several community agencies and they got on the board of director. They basically set themselves up everywhere, and they convinced community agencies that you cannot refuse trans because, again, what's the mantra? Trans women are women. If you drink the Kool-Aid. But the problem when it comes to law is that women have sexo-specific rights that are guaranteed by law. And now trans-identified people have a special category defended by law. But there is an incompatibility, because if you say that trans women are women, and again, it's never the problem, trans men are not the problem in this, because trans men, the most annoying they get is that changing the vocabulary regarding maternity, but they're not going to take on women competition. They're not going to win against men. Like, this is much less of a problem than the inherent male violence of trans activism. So they that's what they did. And I know the story because I know someone who was on the board of director at the time when it happened. And someone came on the board of director and let them know that, by the way, you can no longer refuse trans people because trans women are women and you're being transphobic and so on. So all the agencies just kind of slowly drank the Kool-Aid out of, I think, initially wanting to be open and polite. But honestly, they didn't realize that granting rights there were taking away here. And like, all the women receiving the services, they just need to shut up, because if they go to tell their counselor, I'm uncomfortable being housed with a male, or they're just going to be told they're transphobic. So they really played their game by, and it's so like, why did my employer fire me? Well, I think it's because if they don't fire me, then the trans activists will dox them. Because I was doxxed. That's the name of the practice. They got together. I know they talk on forums among themselves. They go like, let's target this one. Let's find out where she lives. Let's find out where she works. Let's contact her employer. This is what doxing is. It's an active strategy that the opposite camp is using. And it's a very violent strategy. And to remove the livelihood of women, like, how more violent can this get? So I want to say this. Again, they are allowed as a community agency to do whatever they want. They can vote it among themselves. And had I wanted to change this, I would have gone by the appropriate route. But that was not my battle when I was there. My battle was just get a break, get well so that I can back to have the strength of actually carrying a heavy mental load. And when I was there, I was employed for 9 months there. So during the time I was there, I saw 4 male-bodied persons being housed there. And what is extremely offensive is that in their annual reports, just like all community agencies, they'll say that they need to refuse 10 to 12 requests of services a day by women. Yet they had 4 male-bodied persons reside there for substantial periods. We're talking weeks and months, literally occupying the space, the resources, and everything. I'm not saying trans-identified people don't deserve help. I'm saying, why is it always up to women to accommodate them? So among the 4 people that were housed there that were male-bodied, 3 of them were trans-identified, and 1 of them wasn't even trans-identified. And I actually asked about it because that shocked me, because at least I get that we're stuck in this gender Kool-Aid where someone sees someone that is a walking stereotype of all the female stereotypes that feminists are trying to do away with. That's as simple as that. If you want to look like a woman and behave a mannerism, then you're a woman. Okay, that's a battle. Now, what about the other one? So I actually asked someone politely. I didn't make a lot of noise. I just asked someone, can you tell me why this man is being housed here? And they told me because he has a mild intellectual deficiency, and his counselor thought that if they placed him in a male shelter, he was at risk of violence and sexual violence. Again, let's not ask the male sex class to improve and to accommodate gender non-conforming males or vulnerable males. No, let's dump them onto women and let's impose, because the women are the caring, nurturing kind. That's not going to harm. And I used to work for about 4 years in the largest men's shelter in Montreal. And it was the same thing. We had an isolation room because we knew that very effeminate gays and trans prostitutes were at high risk in male shelter to be abused. So we had accommodation, but now no, because now the main goal of trans activism is to convince everyone that reality doesn't exist. And if you say you're a woman, and we know that the law in Canada is based on self-ID. So if you self-identified, again, I'm so tired because there isn't a single thing that they do to identify as a woman that I cannot list as a stereotype. or as something harmful to women, because to pretend that women are the caring, so it's exhausting. So, but had I wanted to do something about it, I would have gone the proper route.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, you are working at this organization and you're seeing all this stuff going on. I'm curious also, among your coworkers, did you guys talk about this? Were other people sort of like, what are they doing? Why this policy doesn't make sense? Or were you just thinking these things alone?
I did have a few private conversations with colleagues, but it's like we didn't eat at the same time as the women being housed there. So we ate like a little bit before or after. So we had our table to ourselves, we're chit-chatting, and some were, it comes up. Those are topics that will come up. And I think around the table, most people were agreeing with me that it matters that woman remains a word that we use to describe female people. And there was one person at the table that I think might have contributed to my doxing, because he was like, he didn't like that conversation. So I don't know. I have no idea where the doxing came from. I have some intuition because I know that there's some, I've been labeled by them, because before being labeled a TERF, years before I was labeled a SWERF. So, there's no escaping. I've always been labeled by whether it's the pseudo Antifas or whatever. They've been on my case for a while. Even for the first time I was made aware by someone that my name and address was circulating on the Antifa forums. I'm doing the quote because this is not what real Antifa is. So it was already 6 or 7 years ago, and it was for something else.
Okay.
So,
and just in case people don't know, SWERF is sex worker exclusionary radical feminist.
Yes, because I'm a whore-phobic. Like, as a survivor of prostitution, I, clearly, it's insane. Like, so when you're an abolitionist, your job is to have all the care and empathy for the people, the prostituted people. My lens aims to criminalize the clients and the pimps, but to absolutely decriminalize and support the women wherever they are in their thinking process. Because when I was stuck in the sex industry, I didn't have the discourse I have today. I hadn't been able to unpack it. The consequences physically hadn't caught up with me either. So when you're in it, you cannot criticize your livelihood, especially if the only social identity you've had. So you want to talk about where I come from. So I was in the sex industry from 16 to 23 years old. And I talk about a sex industry because it is an industry, but I will not talk about a sex trade because it's not a trade. We're not trading something that's fair at all. And it's also not work. So I won't talk about sex work whatsoever. It's not sex, nor is it work, because sex is something that two people do together out of wanting to. And they always try to say that we're moralistic, that we're whore-phobic. It's like such bullshit. If you don't know what healthy sexuality looks like, I'm sorry, I can't help. Again, if you can't envision what it's like to receive gazillions of penetration, unwanted penetration in your body every day, and if you cannot come to the conclusion that not only it's not a human optimal, but like we objectively know a lot of things about prostitution. We know what kind of woman is at risk of falling into it or being trafficked. We know the psychotraumatological consequences to that it leaves you with. We know all the reasoning that women need to tell themselves in order to keep doing this. So it's a lot of work to explain that, and that's supposed to be my main fight, but I've been totally taken away to fight the gender thing.
Right.
There's a lot of things that made me predisposed to fall into this life, namely the fact that I had a father who's addicted to porn and compulsory masturbation, and his entire life is just this pornophile thing. And as soon as my mom was out of the house, he was consuming porn, and without necessarily, like, I wasn't, I guess, supposed to be aware of it, but you are, because you like, if your father puts you to bed and right away puts the porn and you hear the women moaning, so you're like, I knew that it was like a secret thing that I was not supposed to tell my mom. So it's not like he sat me in front of the porn, but he was not careful whatsoever in protecting me from it. And I also got the message because my father himself had worked in the sex industry as a doorman in strip clubs back in the 70s, where the clubs were owned by the mafia. And it was like this, as a child, I was glamorizing my father and the big dangerous life, and he was my hero, and all little girls want to be loved by their dad. So I think the earliest memories I have of being exposed to my father's, it's not a disease, but you know what I mean by that, like his compulsory, he's so like all the porn references, like when you know that that's what your dad considers the cool, awesome woman, and your mother is like the fat person at home that you treat like a cow that gives you children, like you see that, you see, and then as a young child you realize what kind of woman you want to be. You don't want to be the one he disrespects at home and he doesn't love and he doesn't touch. You want to be the one that he thinks is awesome, and then everything prepares you for it, from you know, Pretty Woman to like there's so much that glorifies. And so the youngest memories I have is about 5 years old. Every night we would go for a walk, and again, my father was my hero, so I would go for a walk with him. We would go to the pharmacy, and he would stop in the magazine aisle and look at the porn. And to this day, I'm like, why hasn't there a single adult intervene? Say like, you know, because I'm like, I totally remember seeing the covers. And if you have a parent who like, this is normal, this is what you're exposed to, but at the same time you're not being told to not talk about it, but you know, something about you knows that this is a private thing that you know about daddy. And then he even hid his porn magazine in my playroom, in like a vent in my playroom. It's like, now that I'm an adult and I went to therapy and I unpacked all of this, I realized how inappropriate my father was, and a lot of things helped me also. I really care about not driving on anger, and I was so driven by anger for so long. And that was one of my main goals in therapy, is to understand why did I fall into the life I did so easily, but also to stop being always so agitated inside, because it was unsustainable. You know, I was having ulcers and I was getting sick. And so I know that my father was abused by priests when he was young, because there isn't only you know, the system of like boarding school, the residential school, there wasn't only indigenous people or mentally handicapped people. There's also poor people who was sent to residential school, because in the winter on a farm, it's really hard to feed your kids. You don't have work for them to do. So a lot of the family way up in the where's my English today? In like non-urban zone of like of Quebec, they would ship their kids to the priests and nuns over the winter to take care of them and give them an education, because it's too hard to feed them and you can't afford to give them proper education. Back then they were having like 5-6 kids minimum. So my dad went through the residential school system. I know he was abused. So it helps me to understand that he's a profoundly traumatized person who never got help, and who cannot recognize himself as a victim. I think my current analysis is that he compulsed in stress relief and hyperstimulation with fetishism and all of these things. So he went all into that pornophile life and leading a secret double life and all that stuff. But fundamentally, he's a traumatized child who's never had help, which doesn't excuse. But for me, it helps me have less anger to view it this way, to understand that it's sad, and I prefer to have empathy, which doesn't mean that I don't hold a grudge for what he did, because to this day he never apologized to me. And what he did is get into the sex industry with me by being my driver, by keeping me there for a long time, in the sense that there was never any discussion of doing something else. And I always tell that story because it's fundamental to me.
So he knew what you were doing?
He didn't only know, he wanted me to do that. This is what a cool woman does. My father, my analysis that I got from years of therapy is that I think he wanted to live vicariously through me. At 17 years old, I was hanging out in fetish nights with my father. This is how fucked up my life was. And at the time I liked it, in the sense that I was like, wow, he doesn't judge me. We would go to a fetish night together, but then it's like a large venue. So like I'm in my area with my friends and he's in his area with his friends. And like, it was just so banal, you know? And then he was my driver. And at the time I would be like, well, I'm saving up on drivers because he never charged me. And that became a problem because when I went to see the police to try to get a restraining order against him, I couldn't because he was officially never a pimp because he never took any money from me. He just enjoyed living vicariously this pornophile life, to be around me, to walk into the strip joint and shake the hand of the doorman and like just kind of be in that ambiance. And then even after me, he became drivers for other women. When he got little jobs as a retiree, he was cleaning a dungeon, he was cleaning a strip club, like that. He wants to be in that life. Where does he go for breakfast? To a sexy waitress restaurant. Again, why do these businesses have legitimate operation permits? So it's just a lot to unpack, and I'm at a place where you know, there's still resentment, obviously, because he has no idea of like what it's like to. He never told me that, he never valued my intelligence, never told me that I could do something else. And the breaking point for me that made it all fall into place was I was 23 years old. He drove me to a strip joint to go to work again. And we're in the parking lot, and I tell him, I announced to him, I said, Dad, I just got a bursary to go to university, and basically my schooling will be paid. And then I need to figure out if I can get loan bursary or how to pay rent. But I mean, technically speaking, I get to go to university for free. So I was like, amazing. And he told me, Bello, but you can't stop dancing. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to pay rent? And I was like, did you just hear what I said? You know, so not only he never valued intelligence, but I don't think he can value intelligence. I don't think he has that in him. I spend a lot of time trying to understand what's up in his mind, and his framework to view the world, and I've understand this from a lot of perpetrators or irresponsible people, is that as a young child, no one came to his rescue. No one came to stop it. And I think it developed in him this idea that it's him against the world. So for example, if someone lost their wallet, or you know, for him, it's like, well, they shouldn't have lost it. When as a driver, when he's on the road, in his fucking mind state of mind, he thinks that it's up to cyclists and people who walk to be careful because they're in danger. I'm like, no, it's up to you to be careful because you're the car, you're the danger. But like everything about his mindset, you know, someone would be walking in front of him and would drop $100. He would not grab it and go, hey, by the way, no. He would be like, he shouldn't have dropped it. And so he would, and when he was working in strip clubs as a cleaner, he would steal from the women who forget their stuff overnight and give it to me. I was like, stop doing that, because it's predatory. And that's when I started to understand that some people really have compartmentalized empathy. Because he, like, for me, if someone did that to me, he would be upset, but him, he's doing it to others. So there's like, it's such a non-coherent worldview, but basically it's this worldview of if you don't do it, someone else will. So he always thinks that someone is out to fuck something up or fuck someone over. So it's this predatory way to navigate the world to, I don't know. And I'm not the total opposite. I treat people the way I would want to be treated. So the pride I have, I guess, is that I really, really freaking overcame everything I received, from the violence I got at home, because I also grew up in a violent household where my mother was the source of violence. She screamed a lot, threw objects, beat me until I had the age to respond. Like, I think I was about 12 or 13 when I threw a chair back at her, and that's when she stopped hitting me, because she realized, like, oh, okay, now she's my size, and it's not gonna, you know. So you overcome all of this and you get to a place where you just want to devise solution and proactively help out, and look at what I'm fighting. Like, these are extra layers of crap that I should not have to deal with. It just feels really unfair. Yeah. So I had never had a real job. I'd been only in the sex industry from my teens to my early 20s. So it was really hard for me to get out. Like, you don't have a resume, never had a job, never, just shaking a boss's hands and doing a job interview. All those normal steps were absolutely insurmountable to me. Also because I viewed males in position of authority as possible tricks. I view them as the kind of men who buy women. And when we get out of the sex industry, it doesn't mean we're fully out. Many women will go back several times because they see no other escaping. In my case, I had like a break-in point where I could not have turned one more trick. It was like, I'm done with this shit. But I still kept dancing. No contact, straight stripping, I guess. Really, because I had no other identity, and all I knew to navigate were these codes. And also, I'm pretty freaking smart. So in the sex industry, I felt good. I felt I'm smarter than all those assholes who are paying me. And, I had devised my own pride. And I was also, because I didn't have any drug problem, I actually didn't do drugs in the sex industry. I developed a weed problem several years after because I had nightmares and I couldn't sleep. So instead of getting on heavy medication, I got a prescription about 13 years ago already. And I got a prescription for medical cannabis because it helped me. I had several diagnoses that made me eligible, like migraine, colitis, arthritis, and PTSD. So it's a lesser evil. So I smoke at night still to this day because it really helps me sleep. I would like to wean it out, but then when you have so many other struggles, it's like, when do I get a freaking break? So weed is like this little
it's the one
moment
thing.
break for me. Yeah.
Right.
So during the day, I never feel like smoking. It's really, it's a night thing because all my trauma happened at night. And just to get back, like once you're a vulnerable person that has been traumatized, you never know how re-traumatization can occur. So I had been doing good for several years, going to school, getting some degrees. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm so happy of where I'm at. I have like weekly counselor appointments and I'm really getting involved. I participate in women groups. I was like, everything I felt I lacked before, the connection. Also, I was not a feminist at all. During my whole time in the sex industry, the way I survived was by more telling myself, like, I am made of the same thing as men. Like, I'm not inferior. I'm not like, but I would have said shit like I have a male brain or thing. I would have said things like that before. I had no sorority. I had not understood what true sorority is. And it's really when I got to feminist agencies and I started to partake in group and, they were thanking me for sharing and they were being so kind. I was like, when I first started to attend these groups for victims of sexual violence, I myself came in with my own prejudice because I thought that women would judge me because it was my choice. Because when you're like a happy sex worker, it's your choice, And that's what the discourse defends. And that's why I think it's a double-edged sword, because it makes it that much harder for women to escape when they used to endorse that lib fem thing that it's a work as any other. Because what do you do when you start having fibromyalgia? You're always tired, your body's crashing, you develop autoimmune disease, but you should still be continuing to say that it's a job like any other? No. And usually the consequences will catch up with you only once you get out and the stress comes down and the cortisol level go down. And then you realize that your immune response has been extremely affected from years on of stress. I mean, I was in a shootout. There's like countless. I mean, if I play back my life, sometimes I struggle to realize that it's me who lived this. And a thing that helps me, I mean, we all have our thing. I was severely germaphobe, and that's how I survive in the sex industry, is by being very germaphobe, not doing drugs, not drinking, trying to give myself as much illusion of control as I could. And I also had all these like cleaning rituals. And so when I would come back from work, I would go into the shower and have this mad cleaning ritual. And as soon as I would come back out of my ritual, then I was back and I was Valerie again. So the way I survived the sex industry was by being extremely disassociated or dissociated. I don't know how we say it in English. So it's being extremely dissociated was how I coped. So there was like Courtney, the prostituted person, and there was Valerie, who loves science, who's a nerd. And those lives did not meet. The people did not intertwine. That's how I coped.
Okay.
And when I had my breaking point, we were in some asshole millionaire's house and we were stuck there. I couldn't leave my girlfriend there because she was relapsing on coke, and if I wanted to leave, but if I left, then I would abandon her there. So I couldn't do that. We had no money. We were like at least a $40-$50 cab ride away. So I had to stay there. And then that man did not, the millionaire asshole that with his mention, did not know that I was doing prostitution whatsoever, because we were there for music. It was like a music thing and we were just hanging out there. And so at some point, after a few days of hanging out and being around the band, and he had the recording studio, so like a music thing, but with a lot of drugs and partying, which I don't do, but I wanted to protect my friend who was there. So I stayed. And at some point, he actually offers me money for sex. And I just, it was so fucked up because Valerie doesn't do that. So it's like the first time that a sexual request was coming into my personal life. And I was like, what? And for me, it was extremely dissociative. Like you feel like you float over your body, like you're looking at the situation. And I couldn't leave my girlfriend there. And so it's only like, I think 2 days after that we were able to finally get a ride and get out of that place. And that was my breaking point, because my lives are not supposed to clash. And when my lives did clash, I couldn't cope because this man did not know me as, I mean, you see how I present myself. Like, so imagine when I would put on a hooker's persona, I was totally something else. So yeah, that was it for me. As dissociated as I needed to be to survive, it's when my lives clashed that it was like, whoa, and I couldn't handle. And then I never turned tricks after that, but I still continued dancing for a while.
Okay. And did you take the university scholarship?
Yeah, I did. I studied ecology. I only did a certificate, like a year, but for me, it was such a huge leap because I had just finished my high school as a 23-year-old, and I went straight to university, which usually there's college in between to like prepare you, know how to turn in a proper paperwork with like the cover page and the bibliography, like all those steps that you learn before you hit the university. I didn't have. So, and to be honest, I barely knew where the power switch was on a computer at 23 when I got out of the industry. I was zero technological. So the learning curve was huge. But, when I got some B's and some C's in science, I felt like I was connecting with my inner child who wanted to be an archaeologist at 11 years old. I did a science fair when I was young, so it's like, as much as during all the time I was in the sex industry, I was like using and valuing these phony aesthetic quality. Once I got out, I did the opposite. I compulsed in intellectuality. You would have heard me say things like, "Ugh, sex is so primitive," and like I had the opposite phase.
Right. You
Where
swing
now
to the other end.
now I'm a balanced person. But there was an extreme phase of like rejecting everything and wanting to feel like I need to catch up because I'm so behind on everybody. And then when I got official employments, it would be care jobs. I took care of veterans where I would visit each veteran that was assigned to me would get a weekly visit from me to like run errands for them, accompany them to their appointments. So I did that at first. Then I was also an orderly, just a bunch of care jobs. And then I ended up in this the biggest men's shelter in Montreal, which is called Oldbury Mission. And I was the first female counselor there. It kind of saddens me because none of the women who work there today know that or understand what I had to do or go through to become the first female counselor, because that place had existed for about like 110 years. And when I started working there, I was working maintenance. So I did like, when you talk about building it up, that's what I mean. Because I didn't have like a bachelor's degree in intervention or social work or anything related, I actually built it up. So I cleaned the commercial kitchen for years. And that means cleaning cafeteria and toilets and everything. And then I got to kind of go up on the floors a bit. Because at first they would not want any females on the floor. So I couldn't even, like, it's a 4-story large shelter. At any given point on an evening shift, once the administrative staff was there, I was alone with about 400 males. And you know what? I never had a single problem because you can see with my attitude, I impose a kind of respect and a calm. If someone starts screaming, I'll bring them back down. I've dealt with my own anger. So now I'm quite equipped to deal with anger and crisis situation. And so eventually I got to go up on the floors to work as I was doing, because I did so much in my life. Here in Quebec, sometimes the courses are paid by the government because they need staff. So I also did assistant nursing, but I didn't want to work in it when I realized what it's like, to give like 8 baths to seniors in one morning, and like you got to rush them, and it's like chain work on human beings when you work in nursing homes and so on. And I already knew I wanted to work in chronic homelessness, or helping women escape prostitution. So everything I learned in my nursing class, pharmacology, understanding the vocabulary, makes me so equipped to accompany people. So when like someone is trying to reinsert in society, not only do I know firsthand how hard it is to navigate institution, to get your paperwork back, to like when you haven't done your income tax for like years, and so I'm good at accompanying people. And if they have medical appointments, I'm really good at speaking on their behalf, asking the right questions to the doctor, translating so that the person understands. So everything I've done in my life is basically just added layers of skills so that today I'm this kind of weird animal that has a bunch of various skills, but not that many degrees. Like they're usually year or year and a half long trainings I've done in different things like nursing, orderly, ecology. I also learned languages. When I was going to university in ecology, it was too hard for me to take 4 science classes in order to be full-time. So I would take 3 science classes and 1 language class. So that way I was full-time, but it wasn't so much science. Because like the science class comes with a lab, comes with like paperwork and team projects, like so much.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I learned Portuguese and Spanish.
Okay.
So, and I'm also really in love, like I'm a singer, so I love Latin music. So it's really through the door of music. And I always say, like, for me, whether it's salsa or samba, like Latin music really is my antidepressant. And it takes so much to like perform that stuff. So you need to learn the language, the political context of which these songs were written, because a lot of the sambas have a political component that were like a response to the dictatorship at the time. So I really got immersed in Latin culture, and that saves me. And it takes a lot of focus because not only I'm singing in other languages, but I really want to convey what I'm doing. I want to do it well, you know, and so that when Brazilians or Mexicans come up to me and they're like, wow, like, oh, you're not, you know, so I that's it. Like I need to get busy in projects that are demanding and
Mm-hmm.
stimulating. And so I've always
Yeah.
had music on the side as something else that I do that really keeps me alive. I'm a busker. I haven't done it during COVID for many reasons. First, the city wouldn't allow us and so on, but also because the area of Montreal where I live is called the Centre Sud, the downtown southeast. And that's where the majority of the homelessness is aggregated here. Throughout the winter, they had like a large tent in the park right next to my house. So at any given moment, there was like 400 to 600 homeless people within um, a few blocks, and that's where I live. I'm right in it. I'm also right in the very same neighborhood where I used to be prostituted 20 years ago. You know, so I chose to never leave the area because if I leave, it's not going to get better. So I'm the kind of person that I want to take my hood up with me. So another reason why I didn't busk in the last year was I mean, I'm not going to go on the street, put a bucket and get people to give me money when the level of you know, urgency out there, it has never been greater. First, people don't even have change. I'm not going to go and compete for whatever little resources there is with the homeless people who are having it far worse than me and who are not getting unemployment like I'm fortunate enough to have gotten because of COVID. So uh, I have a very privileged relationship with several homeless people, but it does take me a lot of energy to go out there because they love me, they need me, they come at me, they hug me, even in COVID. Like there's no fucking filter, no boundaries with them. So when I choose to go out busking, I really need to have the energy for it. And frankly, I do it for them, I do it with them because
And can
I'm on the
people find
street.
your work online if they want to listen
Yeah,
to your
I have an
music?
artist page called Legal Tender on Facebook. That's where I archive everything. And you know what else? I chose to never erase any of my archives. So when I created the character Legal Tender, which is the name I go by as an artist and a militant, at first it was born out as a burlesque performer. So I used to be a burlesque singer. I would do numbers. I used to do acrobatic pole dancing. And the burlesque phase I had in the beginning of the 2010s, I guess 2009 to 12, I was a, you know, popular burlesque performer here in Montreal. It was really like it's an intermediary step from trying to analyze what am I going to keep and what am I going to throw away from all these weird references I have from having been in the sex industry. It's like walking elegantly with 9-inch heels has no fucking use or purpose outside of a show life, and now politically, I won't even wear heels anymore because I don't even want to be seen with heels by young women. Like I'm now, so I went from being in the sex industry. 10 years later, I was missing something about like getting ready, the costumes, so then I created a burlesque character called Legal Tender, and I chose to never erase any of my archives. So if you go to Legal Tender, you scroll down and you start from my oldest photo album, you'll have bondage picture, fetish stuff, burlesque, pole dancing. And what's beautiful to me about it is that you see the chronology, you see my body language change, you see my own limit of what's acceptable or not change. You see me going from being putting up burlesque photo shoots to doing TV interview on topics of politics as of 2000, and so I like that, because if someone comes at me and says like, you're a whorephobic, you don't, it's like, shut the fuck up, because like, you have no idea where I come from. I have unpacked all of this. The person I am today is the result of a lot of thinking about what's to keep, what's to let go, what are the references that are codes that we receive as female that end up being harmful, am I replicating these patriarchal expectations? And so yeah, I go from being a burlesque performer to 10-12 years later, now I'm a political animal. I just, and I never removed anything, because anyway, they can find it. Like if you start being ashamed and removing stuff, it's just going to bite you in the ass later. So I left everything. That way, no one can say that I'm a prude, that I come from a moralistic point of view, that, it's
Right.
It's a good place now. It's a good place. I feel coherent. There's no more of those gender stereotype prisons around me. Makeup. It's not about wearing or not wearing makeup. It's about makeup not being a prison. Today it's hot. I don't care. I'm not wearing makeup. If one day I feel like doing it, I'll do it. It needs to not be a prison. Same with, for example, armpit. Like, you want to shave or not shave, it doesn't matter. What matters is that when we see someone with armpit hair, we need to stop reacting. That's all.
Right.
Just don't react. You do you, boo. Like, you do what you want. You place
Yeah.
the limit where you want it. But when your judgment look at another woman for like, that's what we need to change. We need to have that freedom to be whatever kind of woman we want to be.
Yeah.
So now I feel like I'm in a good place. And as much as I started to be public as a survivor of prostitution, I think about 6-7 years ago. And now I'm at a point where, it's impossible to shame me with that. Someone would go like, you used to be a hooker. It's like, thank you. That's wonderful, because you've just filtered yourself out. You've just shown me your true colors, and they are ugly. So I appreciate. And that says nothing of me, because I'm not an ex-hooker. I'm years of therapy and years of like understanding this and understanding what part is mine, what part wasn't. It wasn't my part to be groomed by my father. It wasn't my part to have my father as a driver at 17. None of that was my fault. It was also not my fault if the rest of my family were not comfortable with it. And my godfather told my mother, don't give her my number, because he didn't want to, like, for people with money. So he was like, well, I'm afraid someone's going to knock on my door and like ask me for money for drug debts. And it's like, I never even did drugs when I was in the industry. And you would have known that had you bothered to come and have coffee with me with your niece and ask your niece, how are you? Is there anything I could do? Would you like perhaps to go back to school? No, but like, again, so the shame is not mine to carry. The shame is for men who purchase me, men who negotiate the sexual consent of a vulnerable woman. And, I'm just saying this, survivors who have a supportive family, they heal better. They do better.
Yeah.
It matters.
So. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your story. And what else do people need to know about the case right now with your former employer?
Yeah. So they refused to negotiate. And they basically, what they did is they twisted my words. When you take a sentence out of context. So this brings us back to the general climate of what we call rape culture. How sometimes a woman has a hard time recognizing herself as a victim initially. So you'll have someone who was raped the day before, and the next day she's texting her rapist, and that plays against her.
Yeah.
So when I was first fired, I I thought that the French word congédiement, which is firing, I thought it referred to having done a fault, and that you're fired because you've done something wrong. But because I hadn't done anything wrong, I was kind of, in the first few days after the firing, I wrote that I left from a common accord. But then in all the follow, and that's what they're saying, well, you see, she says she left out of a common accord. Okay, but like all the following email explains what I mean. So, I mean, you've placed me in front of a non-choice into which it was either I don't think the way I think if I want to stay, and I had agreed to not speak about it at work at all, to, even remove my affiliation with your agency from my Facebook, because I was so proud to work there that I had listed my employer on my Facebook. I had no shame. I was super happy. So I was proposing all of these accommodations so that I could stay, but none of it would work. So it would just end up being no, because trans women are women and you're a transphobe and there's no room for transphobe here. And like, that's so painful. So where it's at is that I actually just spoke with my lawyer a few hours ago, and we decided to give them one last chance to settle this outside of court. So we said you should really pay attention to the rest of the email chain, because clearly you haven't. You just focused on the first one where I'm saying that I wasn't fired for doing something wrong, but that I had to leave. And then in the following week after my firing, I called labor rights agencies that help you unpack this and understand that in fact this is a disguised firing.
Right. So they were trying to say, oh, so you've admitted that you left of your own accord, as if that was an admittance.
But then all the following email, and he's being so like, I don't know the word, like, arrogant, saying, oh, so, like the tone is so improper from a female agency contacting a worker. It's just.
And is this the same man who fired you?
Yeah. All of my exchanges within that, I actually don't know if he made that decision with his superiors. I think he made that decision in his own mind, and he just felt entitled to fire me for being a transphobe. And now I'm sorry, but I know my rights, and I've been really thinking about this, and this is not okay. So we're going to fix this. So they have a last chance to settle out of court, and they can do what they want. My job is not to harm them or destroy them or any of that. It's just to correct this wrong. And I hope that they retain from this that you cannot fire a feminist for her feminist view, that furthermore, she's agreeing to not share at work. And I'm sorry, but like, my free speech is all I have. At the end of the day, I know that I'm on the right side of history. So, and the more I saw other women experiencing the same, and in March, Chris Elston, Billboard Chris, got beaten up like very like close to me, So that hit me. That's when I realized, like, wow, like the level of violence has gotten.
Yeah, and he got beat up by trans activists, in case people don't know the story.
Yeah. And that was hard, because then I felt like, and now as I am coming out publicly with this story, I know that there could be backlash. Yeah. And that's kind of what we choose again. Is it a choice? I don't have a choice. I have to do this because it's just, it's an unfairness.
Yeah.
Furthermore, you're not going to do this to a survivor. It's just not going to fucking happen. So I'm hoping that they change their mind and that they agree to settle out of court. If not, I'm going to push this. I don't care. Yes. I don't care. This needs to be done.
And, to add on to the reasons why you're doing it, I mean, you're also standing up for other women too. So thank you for that. And by coming out publicly, you are doing that. We are also planning to give Valerie a grant from the Free Speech Fund, because she is exactly the type of recipient we are looking for to support and to show other people that there will be support for you in these types of situations. And Valerie, is there anywhere else that you want people to know that they can go support you, or what should they do if they want to support you?
I think they need to be vigilant around themselves. Like, I understand that some people are not ready to take it on publicly, but the more people stay anonymous and kind of don't get into it, it falls on us, the very, outspoken ones. And I just, support is in little day-to-day conversation. It doesn't need to be a big thing, but to stop remaining neutral, that's already a first start. So I'm seeing a lot of people not willing to take position. They know that this makes no sense, but they have seen what it costs to challenge gender ideology. So unfortunately, it kind of leaves us alone. So I know a lot of feminists, I don't judge people's individual decision because they do what they feel they need to do to be safe. But a lot of feminists are out there with anonymous profile with fake names. But the people like me who do it under their real name, it's because all the backlash falls is on us. So can we please share the burden? Because trans activists are lashing out on people like me and like my other friends who have been deplatformed. So
Yeah.
it would help if a lot more people would just have the courage to say, well, no, this, and you don't need to get all agitated about it. You can just state your position calmly and firmly and leave it there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rest of the people at home, they're seeing all the nasty trans activist comments.
Right.
So it's, you know, I think they're witnessing how this is mad and that we are using tools that are absolutely unacceptable in a mature, respectful public discourse. So let the
Exactly.
trans activists make themselves look bad. They're very good at that.
Yeah.
And just support us, but also don't be afraid to voice it, because the more mainstream this cause gets, just a few days ago, I was speaking with a friend. I was explaining him in great details, and he had totally missed that boat. He had no idea that this was going on politically. And at everything I was saying, he was like, "What? What?" Like
Wow.
he couldn't get it. Like
Yeah.
it was so obvious to him. Well, I think it's really obvious to a lot of people, but the strategies of trans activists are so violent that it makes normal people want to stay out of it. But when you stay out of it, you mean that I get all the hate mail and I get my Facebook shut down because it gets reported. And now I just got on Twitter under Legal Tender Montreal, and I'm trying to see how Twitter will treat me.
Right.
But, you know,
Twitter's an interesting beast as well.
it is. Yeah, it is.
So yeah, I love that message that more and more people do need to stand up and you know, consider helping support the Free Speech Fund so that we can support the
Absolutely.
people who do stand up. And you can join us on Patreon, I'll link below, or donate on GoFundMe or on our site. So Valerie, thank you. This was a wonderful interview. And yeah, thank you so much for your courage and for standing up
Thank
for
you
yourself and for
as
women.
well. And you've been very supportive of me. You and I have been in touch, and your kind words of like, hang in there, and like it's been very helpful. So
Okay, I'm
my
glad.
tribe is there for me. Yeah.
Yes, we are here for you. And I think that, you know, people who are listening, your support also matters. So thank you. And I look forward to seeing the reaction to this. If you guys want to let us know what you think of Valerie's former employer, leave it in the comments below. And great. Thank you so much.
Life is beautiful. We're gonna get out of this eventually.
Good message to end on. Yes, we will, if we
Thank
push.
you.